BBC's Director General Tim Davie and Head of News Deborah Turness have stepped down following criticism that a BBC documentary misled viewers by editing a speech incorrectly from President Trump. The network doctored the president's speech footage to make it look like he called for January 6 violence in their investigative series Panorama. If you have not seen the edit, here it is.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So the Telegraph, which is a media outlet over in the UK, got a hold of an internal memo last week, some signal chats that went on to feature the side-by-side, or they did in their reporting, the side-by-side video, which showed the difference and exposed the BBC documentary that aired last year. Let's welcome in Bobby Eberle, chairman of the Fort Bend County Republican Party. Dan Turrentine, co-host of The Morning Meeting, joins us now as well. And I think, Dan, one of the things that surprised me a little bit about this story is that it was this big of a story because I think a lot of people watched President Trump's speech in real time and saw what he actually said, but a lot of people didn't. And this became the reality of the situation for so many, especially so many mainstream media members and Democrats on the left.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ridiculous that they did this. As a Democrat, I think that day is going to kind of stand for itself in history. There's no need to edit. There's no need to try to slant it or, kind of misdirect the viewer. I don't know why they did this. I don't know why some Democrats, do this themselves when they're talking about it. Again, I think the events leading up to January 6th, the day of, speak for themselves. There's just no reason to do this.
Yeah, Bobby, Brian Stelter, who is CNN's chief media analyst, he had this to say about the BBC and the current media environment that they and all the media are operating in.
Some of Trump's friends and allies deriding the BBC. Caroline Levitt, for example, calling the network fake news. So within the company, there was pressure on the BBC to apologize, to take action. And now this weekend, we see the two top leaders both stepping down. Quite unusual to see the two top leaders of that news organization both stepping down under pressure.
To me, there's kind of like a parallel here to Andrew Cuomo having to step down as governor of New York because, he killed thousands of people based on his COVID policy, but it was the groping of a female staffer that actually got him, kicked out of office. When in reality, when you have the BBC making so many factual errors, Bobby, over the years, particularly when it comes to what happened in Gaza. You had BBC reporters embedded with Hamas members. This is just like the tip of the iceberg of all the issues at the BBC.
Yeah, it's so typical. And I agree 100% with what Dan was saying. There's no reason for Democrats in general to go down this road of editing. But this BBC or the Stelter report, it's so typical. It's like, hey, the only reason they made changes, that they got rid of these executives, was because of, quote, conservative outrage. Like it's us driving the issue, when the issue is that they deceptively edited. They did not tell the real story to their audience. And that's, as journalists, that's what everybody should do, every one of them in that profession. That's why these people are gone, because they are dishonest to their profession and to who they're trying to serve. So, yeah, it's not conservative outrage. It's the fact that these people can't do their jobs.
All right, there's more pressure on Kevin Roberts, who's in charge of the Heritage Foundation. They're facing a lot of intense backlash still as several members cut ties with the leadership over this fight of anti-Semitism. Former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann has resigned now from the foundation's task force on anti-Semitism, blasting the group's leadership, including Kevin Roberts, for refusing to hold Tucker Carlson accountable. She says Heritage has failed to condemn anti-Semitic voices on the right. The controversy erupted after Roberts backed an interview between Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. I don't know about backing it, but refused to criticize it, really. And Kevin Roberts said he would stand by Tucker no matter what. In her resignation, Bachmann warned the scandal is a brand-destroying controversy for one of the most respected institutions on the right. Dan, this is interesting to watch. Kevin Roberts, drip, 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 drip. Every single day, there's more pressure on him to step aside if he can't clean this mess up.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's remarkable because our side has struggled with the Israeli-Palestinian issue now for the last several years, and it tied Kamala Harris and Joe Biden in knots. This is a little bit different. That this is about the allowing a conversation versus support of Palestine per se. But it is remarkable, and I think if you're J.D. Vance and others, this issue is not going to go away. There are strands running through the conservative movement, just we have on our side. And it's not a black and white issue anymore for either party.
Yeah, this goes to like watching Tucker Carlson, someone who we used to admire and respect, like go down this rabbit hole, like to be completely obsessed, Bobby, with the issue of Israel. Like he's now like speaks positively of Zohar Mamdani, but focuses very rarely on anything else on the left in a negative sense. That's what he used to do. We saw the interview with Ted Cruz, how critical he was of Ted Cruz, but did not bring any of that to the interview with Nick Fuentes. And, I think lines have to be drawn. I think Dan brings up a good point. Like J.D. Vance has got to have this conversation with Tucker. I saw an interview, I think it's coming out this Sunday on CBS Sunday Morning with Dave Portnoy, where he talks about the fact that he's doing these pizza reviews on the street and people shout anti-Semitic remarks at him. This has got to be stopped, and the only way it's going to stop is when the people at the top, like J.D. Vance, actually address it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be difficult. Like Dan said, I mean, this is an issue now that is coming over to the Republican Party as well. And I think we need to walk a fine line between, what's acceptable, what's not, and our roots as Americans on the object of free speech. I don't want to talk about Tucker specifically, but let me just say that I think we should be very, very careful because I'm not one to promote any protected class at all. So whether it's Jewish people, blacks, whites, Christians, we're all Americans here. We're all created by God in his likeness, and we are unique and special, and we should treat everyone like that, and our laws should reflect that. So as soon as we go down a certain road that one class is more protected than the other, I think that's where we're getting this divisions on the right as well. And the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that if I were to criticize, say, Spain, doesn't mean that I'm anti-Catholic, which I am Catholic.
Well,
the same.
Let me just jump in here because, we're not saying that Tucker Carlson should not interview Nick Fuentes. There's some people who have said that. Part of me feels like that. What I said, I think, is really important. I've heard Victor Davis Hanson say the same thing, Dan. It's if you're going to have Nick Fuentes on your show, apply the same level of critique that you apply to someone like Ted Cruz. And if you're going to focus on an issue, like, it's fair to criticize Israel and their execution of the war. There are civilian casualties and things like that. Those issues can be addressed, but do it, from a journalistic standpoint. Actually try to get different views on there, and Tucker hasn't done that. That's the issue, is that if you're going to platform someone like Nick Fuentes, at least apply a journalistic lens and a standard to that type of interview. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, especially since, as you say, he got pretty aggressive with Ted Cruz. I mean, that interview was pretty jarring, the way he went back and forth with Ted Cruz. And then given that Nick Fuentes has, praised Adolf Hitler, not just
right.
Trying to kind of move past it, but actually affirmatively speaks positively, to not then say, oh, wait a sec, time out. That's a pretty controversial statement. I got a problem. You're free to say it. But, again, I think we're going to hear this issue because on the right, I think the issue is more, should taxpayer dollars be going to other, to support other countries when they could be better spent at home? On our side, it's more, should you support Palestine or support Israel? But this issue is going to bedevil both parties.
Yeah, it's not going away. That is certainly true. All right, Dan, Bobby, stick around with us. We got more to talk about. Welcome back. Let's take a walk down memory lane. When Nancy Pelosi first entered Congress in 1987, she was 47 years old, and at the time, she and her husband, Paul Pelosi, reported between $610,000 and $785,000 total in their portfolio, which included about a dozen stocks like Citibank and several other companies that no longer exist today. That same portfolio is now worth to be an estimated about $133 million. This is according to Quiver Quantitative. So a whopping return of nearly 17,000% compared to a 2,300% increase for the Dow Jones over the years. Apparently working in politics is very profitable if you have the right information. The report comes days after her retirement announcement and amid a refocus on wealth in the Democratic Party. leaning into the leadership of AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zohran Mamdani. The tax the rich crowd are now at the forefront, ready to reshape the Democrats' political policy. Let's welcome back Bobby Eberle and Dan Turrentine. So, Dan, is like Nancy Pelosi, she's going to retire. Is everyone just going to stay quiet about this, or is she going to become kind of the poster lady for wealth and prosperity, I guess you could say, on the Democratic Party?
Well, her husband was an investment banker for Citigroup prior to her coming into Congress. They actually were fairly wealthy even before she came in. But look, he continued to be an active investor her entire time in Congress. There are a lot of Democrats who would tell you, and look, she was when I was a consultant, she was a client of mine, full disclosure. I love Nancy Pelosi. But when people tried to ban members of Congress and their families from stock trading, she fought it pretty tooth and nail, and it raised eyebrows even back, 10 years ago when that happened. And look, members of Congress, their kids and spouses making money, the White House too. It's been a source of agita in both parties, but it's certainly, when your partner is so active in the markets, the tough look given how much information you're aware of.
Yeah, I mean, we all remember, well, not all of us, but a lot of us remember the Visa IPO. There was questions about that. 60 Minutes did a big story about that. She got very offended by even the questions about that. I do think, too, Bobby, when you look at this, this is a problem for Republicans as well. You can't go to Congress with virtually nothing and then suddenly get rich. It happens all the time and far too often. And even with things like the shutdown, when Republicans and Democrats in Congress continue to collect their paychecks while rank and file government employees are not getting paid, it just looks really bad.
Yeah, it does. And it's across the board. It's gaining money from stocks. It's the special carve-outs that you have for legislatures, special health care, just all these perks that show an out-of-touch nature of, the establishment or the ruling class. And I tell you what, my son, who's 23 now, he says, Dad, if you ever make it into Congress, the number one thing you need to do is do this bill, the bill that avoids stock trading as you're a member of Congress. Because look at that, that's 8 times gain on the Dow that Pelosi had over this career. I mean, it's outrageous. And, I can pick stocks left and right and not do so well. But when you have that inside information and you use it like that to your benefit, that is exactly what we did not want. The founders did not want from a citizen legislature, which they hoped to have.
Yeah, I think one thing, and if you're not going to get the stock ban, it's going to take a lot of political will and an uprising really from voters, Dan, to actually get this in place. There is a delay on when they have to report their stock trades. I think it's 30 days. If they did this instantly, I think this would also help. There are actually now funds where you can directly track like what Nancy Pelosi is investing in, so you can also profit from her. But Dan, what do you think is the solution for this? Because if this continues, when Nancy Pelosi is gone, there's going to be somebody else in Congress cashing in. What do you think ultimately happens?
Look, I think sunshine is always the best disinfectant. And I'd say, look, one of the challenges Democrats are going to have is I think we want to talk about some of the things going on with certain members of the White House these days. It's hard to say, hey, look, go look at their, alleged corruption and kind of not ours. I think instant disclosure is really the key. I hear people who say, well, it's not fair if I'm making an investment. Hedge funds and others don't report instantly. But you're a member of Congress. You have the public trust. You do have inside information. If a hedge fund manager has non-public information and trades on it, they'll go to jail. So, yeah. Members of Congress and their family, just declare it and then let the voters decide. They're smart enough. If they think that there's some shenanigans, you'll pay a price.
Yeah. We can also, I guess, pour some out for Nancy Pelosi's shoulder pads back in the day. Those are never coming back. I don't think.
He's a fashion maven.
Classic 80s.
I'm no expert on ladies' fashion, but those are something. Those were impressive that we just saw in the video. Bobby, when you hear Democrats so often talk about taxing the rich, it seems to be punitive more than anything else because you don't hear them talk as much about helping the poor.
Right, and well, because it's always been that wedge issue. I remember Tom Daschle back in the day, brings out this muffler saying, hey, this is what you're going to get, and the rich person's going to get the whole Lexus, and you just get the muffler off of it. And it's always been this wedge issue, and yet they can never identify or grasp the fact that, You know, it's this upper 10% that's paying, you know, over 50% of all the taxes. When you try and pin them down on what is a fair share, they never can say, because most of it is being paid by those people that are out there producing and growing the economy. I mean, if you attack the taxpayers, the producers out there, you're going to get this lack of growth and all the problems that we had during the Biden economy.
And New Yorkers are about to find out exactly what that is like with Zohar Mamdani, although we did see Kathy Hochul pump the brakes, pun intended, on his plan for free buses. That's not going to happen. I think there's going to be a lot of disappointment, too, on that front. All right, we got Dan and Bobby coming back with us. Well, President Trump made some history yesterday, becoming the first sitting president to attend an NFL regular season game since 1978. He showed up to see the Washington Commanders, some still call them the Redskins, take on the Detroit Lions. The president started his visit by flying over the stadium in Air Force One. Pretty epic, as you can see there. Margot Martin, a special assistant to the president, posting that video. Trump also took to the microphone to swear in U.S. military members during halftime, and he got a mixed reception from the Washington, D.C. crowd. Well, afterwards, President Trump received a one-of-a-kind jersey, a gift from the Commanders owner, Josh Harris. Bobby Eberle and Dan Turrentine are back with us. And I don't know, Dan, looked to me like there were a lot of people in the crowds, more so than a regular Commanders game. Were they paid protesters?
No, I you know, as
kidding.
a Giants fan, it frustrates me. The Commanders aren't too bad these days, and the Lions are pretty good. So I imagine that was legit. But look, I mean, if Kamala Harris went to the Alabama LSU game on Saturday night, I imagine she would have been booed. That's a little bit of an away game for the president to go into Maryland there.
Yeah.
But look, he did the right thing. He was going for a good cause, which is to honor the Marines. And, oh, by the way, they may end up naming their new stadium after him. The Commanders are the beggar in that situation. Don't be surprised if it happens.
This is one of the things that I do not like about modern politics, where you have a president, you know, or a vice president go to a sporting event. There was once upon a time when we grew up that, you know, there would be a polite round of applause, perhaps, and we're completely past that, you know. It's just a shame, but that's where we are. And I think you're right, Dan. I think this crowd was kind of geared towards booing anyway, based on the location in the People's Republic of Maryland. The president also gave one fan a memory for life, handing a young boy his own presidential coin as he was leaving. Take a look at this. I love it. You could tell that the little boy was kind of shocked, Bobby, because he was kind of stoic when he was getting the coin from President Trump, but as he walked back, he like flexed, as you saw there. That was a great moment.
Oh, it was great, and it takes you back too. I mean, that kid was very polite, you know, saying thank you, Mr. President. And you go back to those days. I remember those days where it didn't matter what stadium it showed up. It didn't matter if the president was Republican or Democrat. There was that round of applause that you give to the president. You know, not the Republican one or the Democrat one. And I miss those days too. But it's a moment like that kid's never going to forget. And it's really cool to see the president out there. You know, first time in almost 50 years going to a regular season game. Yeah. And out there, he's always doing these things, interviews, working with the people, and it's great to see.
And as Dan pointed out, much different reception we see when President Trump goes to Tuscaloosa, like he was for the Georgia-Alabama game last year. All right. Since Dan talked about what he was watching last time was the Dan Patrick Show, we're sticking with the sports theme. We got another couple of indictments, this time for Major League Baseball pitchers involved in the gambling probe. The feds say Cleveland's Luis Ortiz and Emmanuel Clase conspired with sports bettors in 2023 on specific pitches that they would throw in these games. The bettors then allegedly used that information to place prop bets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, this indictment came just weeks after several NBA players were arrested in an illegal gambling scheme. Do you think there are more arrests to come, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, this is so prevalent now, not just in professional sports, but college sports. It's those under the radar games. You know, who would have thought that a pitch in July was being a pitcher making millions of dollars made $5,000 off of it. I just think it's sad, but the good news is they're catching them.
Yeah.
But it does make me nervous as a sports fan when you start hearing about this.
Yeah, I think this is something, I mean, I imagine that in locker rooms across every professional sport and college sports and every single league, Bobby, there are a lot of very nervous players right now.
Absolutely. And again, you hate to see this because, I mean, this is sports. This is like the purest of the pure, you know, the one team against another or one individual against another, and the best person or team wins. That's the ideal right there. So if it's set up, if you're throwing things, or if you're targeting or, you know, labeling these pitches where they know it's going to come, I mean, that can affect the score. It can affect a run. I mean, there's a lot at stake in something like that. And so these people they're bound to be nervous because you got to pay the price, because the American people will not put up with their sports being rigged.
All right, friends, thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And before you go, please hit that subscribe button above. Once you do, tell your friends, share it, spread the word about the 13-minute news hour so we can keep growing. And for more great content, check out these videos right here, and I'll see you next time.